Mr. Marles, this timeline will span several US presidential administrations. Are you concerned that a future US leader might tear it up?
Well, I'm not, is the answer to your question. The US alliance has thrived under successive administrations and governments in Australia since the end of since the Second World War, and that includes over the last 10 years. So I'm confident that this will be an enduring arrangement with the United States. I'm confident on that of that based on past record. I'm also confident about it because right now elements of this arrangement will require congressional approval. Our American counterparts are busily working with members of the American Congress in respect of it, in the House and the Senate. And that's across the political spectrum. And across the political spectrum, there is complete support for the relationship with Australia and the AUKUS arrangement. So we enter this with a high degree of confidence. Can I just answer the question? The answer to your question is defence land.
Future defence land, you could apply Kimber as the defence location.
It's defence land, is the answer to your question.
So you made it very clear in the literature this morning that the station submarines in Western Australia will not constitute a US base. However, if there are up to 4 submarines out there helping to train Australian sailors, they could be called on at any time to provide support in the Pacific or in Asia for the US. In what way is that not a base?
Well, it's a forward rotation, so they're not going to be based there. But right now we have a forward rotation of US Marines in Darwin. So the same point can be made in respect of that presence. And we have an ongoing use of the continent in various ways by the United States, and not just by the United States. For example, Singapore probably uses our continent more than any country in terms of its military operations. But we made clear, and I made clear in my sovereignty statement to the Parliament a few weeks ago, that it has been a bipartisan position of governments in this country and remains the position of the Albanese government, that there won't be foreign bases in Australia, and this will not be a foreign base. It's a forward rotation.
Is it possible that we'll be maintaining and operating 3 classes of submarines, that is the Virginia, the Collins and the AUKUS submarines? And if so, is there any concern, and can I ask Admiral Meigs as well, is there any concern within Defence about the prospect of operating 3 different submarines?
And I'll hand over to Admiral Meigs. We obviously will be inherently operating 2 as a result of this announcement. It's the preference is to operate as fewer classes as possible. This is the step that we have needed to take in order to close the capability gap. We can't escape from the fact that over the last decade, seeing our country go in and out of a deal with Japan and then in and out of a deal with France has meant that we lost a decade there. And the alternative to doing this is to have a capability gap, or probably the alternative is to be solely relying on a life of type extension of Collins, which is an answer, but through the 2030s will increasingly become not a great answer. In terms of operating 3, that really is going to be a decision for a future government. There wouldn't be much of an overlap, but it's going to be a question of the precise year in which you would retire the last Collins versus the precise year in which you would introduce the first SSN AUKUS. They will ultimately be decisions for future governments. But we are confident that we can manage having the 2 submarines in the fleet, and there will be a considerable degree of commonality between the Virginias and the SSN AUKUS, which will mean that the difference is not as large as it looks. But